My day job is at the National Information Technology Development Agency, where I head the Government Development and Regulations Department. I will start by asking, we have one of our panelists, Rudman Muhammad, is joining online, so we would give him the honor of introducing himself first before I move on to my colleagues who are here with us. Mr. Muhammad.
Yes, my brother. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Muhammed Rudman, the CEO of Internet Exchange Point of Nigeria. Thank you so much, my brother, for the for allowing me to talk. Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome. To my left.
My name is Folayan Michael Oluwasegun. I work with the National Information Technology Development Agency. I work with the e-government development and regulation department. And of course, that's the department that is saddled with the country code top level domain, together which we work with NITDA, and of course, the e-government aspect of the NITDA mandate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Folayan.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zainab Aminu, the Gender Technical Officer for CTAD. Okay, yeah. My name is Zainab Aminu, Gender Technical Officer for CTAD, and also an instructional facilitator at the Pan-African Youth Ambassadors for Internet Governance. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Busayo Balogun. My daytime job following Mr. Ewah is with NITDA. I'm the head of corporate services there at the Nigeria Internet Registration Association, the registry in charge of the .ng. Thank you, and you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so my name is Nwokoro Osondu. I speak for an organization called Initiative for Digital Inclusion, which is, so I represent Initiative for Digital Inclusion. It's a civil society organization that's actively involved in research policy around digital inclusion. We've done a bit of work around that for the FCDO. We are still doing same, and we partner with CTAD in certain issues. I also practice law. I have worked a bit in the space of communications regulation and policy and compliance. So that's my story. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nwokoro. I almost forgot.
Okay.
I almost forgot you were online, and thanks for your prompt intervention. As you may observe, this panel is well balanced. Not like the previous panel that was tilted towards the female gender. Here we have two gentlemen who are online. We have two ladies here, and then two gentlemen here as well. So this was critically thought of. It's not a coincidence. Another thing I want to point out about this panel is that we have a mix of government representatives. We have industry, as well as civil society. So we believe that the perspective that will be shared here will be also balanced, because the issues around digital infrastructure and inclusiveness are as complex as they may be. So I also like to begin by referencing the last session we had, the high-level session. A lot was discussed around infrastructure. Well, we had the issues around it, the challenges. Some talked about funding. We also talked about access, across different demographics. There was also the discussion around dealing with the emerging, factors that come with the increasing development and deployment in digital infrastructure, especially around data, right, and keeping the populations safe. That is enhanced coverage as well as a safe usage of digital infrastructures. So I'd like to share, I'd like to ask our panelists, beginning with Mr. Muhammad, where he thinks that these issues will be better addressed, from the perspective of, enhanced deployment, availability, and usage in a way that, connects with all sections of the Nigerian society. Mr. Muhammad.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Ewah. You mentioned a few things, but I don't think I can talk to all of them. Maybe I should focus on the access aspect, since where my role here is to ensure access, affordable internet access to Nigerians. So what I would suggest, when it comes to access, available access to every single Nigerian, is for the regulators, both NCC, NITDA, to ensure that you have, developmental regulation where, like what NCC has done when it comes to infrastructure sharing, to ensure that there are such good policies where, it will be an enabling policies for the entire ecosystem. And for example, as the television stations are moving digital, the frequencies that they are using for the transmission of those TV signals, will not be smaller, because if you are moving from digital to analog, from analog to digital, you have remaining frequency because you need less frequency when you are using digital. So I think it's good for the regulators to look at that, to see how they can use that, and give it freely for all Nigerians to use. So for example, all over the world, you have the ISM band, industrial, scientific, medical band, where people can use it to transmit signal from one point to another. We can also have our own in Nigeria out of that TV white space, where educational institutions, smaller community ISPs, ISPs in remote locations can use that frequency at no cost, because as you know, frequency is very expensive. The frequency for 5G that was sold to two organizations, they paid almost $250 million for each one of them. So it's on the high side. So to enable that, I think the regulators can do that. It's also important for the internet service providers, the telecommunication companies in Nigeria, to find ways to start collaborating, because what is happening is that each one of them is operating in silos. The infrastructure is being duplicated. If there is a point A to B where a service provider need to dig, another service provider, you see 4 or 5 of them are digging the same point A to B. Meanwhile, there is B to C that needs capacity, and none of them is doing, because they are only focused on the ones that will have revenue impact immediately. But if they do tend to collaborate, it means an ISP, 1 or 2 ISPs can do A to B, another one can do B to C, C to D, and then they can share in infrastructure. And that's where government, the developmental regulation comes in, when it comes to infrastructure sharing. The NCC has now, ensured that, telcos can give out their mast. That's why, IHS, for example, is managing substantial part of the infrastructure, American towers and the rest. It's an infrastructure sharing. One mast will be able to handle all the radio antennas. Before now, MTN, we will see a mast close by 3 or 4 of them, one owned by MTN, one owned by Airtel, one owned by Glo, and that means duplication of infrastructure. It makes the cost very high, but when you start sharing infrastructure, it makes the cost cheap. And as we know right now, is mostly non-active, devices that are being shared. And NCC has now a policy that they can even start sharing the active lines, and that's where virtual mobile network operators will come in, and you maybe in near future you will see a network that has no single physical presence anywhere, but they are selling SIM cards and you can use it to log in. So I think those are some of the areas that governments need to really focus on to see how they can provide, and the telcos as well, how internet can be cheaper and for everyone to have access. I don't know whether I have spoken too much. Let me, since I'm not timed. Thank you so much, Dr. Ben.
Thank you. Interesting you say we're not going to talk about access, but you talked a whole lot and beautifully about it.
I said I'm focusing on access, not other things.
Okay, I see.
Yes.
Okay. You highlighted two things I took among others. Using government policy to drive down costs or make internet access more affordable. I recall that during COVID-19, a few of the regulators worked around the zero rating policy, whereby internet, well, some websites, particularly those for education, could be accessed without data. Right. I think that is some approach which resonates with one of the points that Muhammad mentioned, and of course co-location, which has continued to be popular among the telcos and other organizations involved in the distribution of internet access. I'll come back to my colleagues here, and I'll go straight to Zainab, who is from civil society, right? Yeah. So I would like to have your own perspective on the challenges, that's faced when it comes to digital infrastructure development. Maybe you'll be able to talk about one or two of those specific challenges, and from your experience, how this have been dealt with, and what we could do better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ben. Talking about digital infrastructure, definitely there must be several challenges that hello. Okay, maybe I'll increase my volume. Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. We can hear you loud and clear.
All right, thank you very much. Talking about digital infrastructure, there are so many challenges that can be identified, but I'm going to talk about a few of them. First of all, I'm going to talk about cybersecurity. If we look at even in the hyper session, we observed that most of the discussion were surrounded around cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is one of the biggest challenges that face our internet accessibility, like the data breaches, the hacking, the online fraud, and what have you. So cybersecurity, in my opinion, is one of the greatest challenges that will face in the digital infrastructural development in Nigeria, and which would need a multi-stakeholder approach to be able to address, because the earlier we address cybersecurity, in order to enable adoption, because a lot of talks have been around accessibility. Most times, if we look at accessibility, the problem is not having access to the internet, is adopting it when you know you are safe and secure in the internet space. So cybersecurity is one big challenge that we need to look at. And then when we talk about the physical infrastructure, we need to look about the aspect of vandalism. Vandalism is one huge challenge that we also need to address. The earlier speaker from IPNX, Mr. Muhammed Rudman, talked about fiber optics and installation. So when we look at the effects of vandalism, when independent ISPs are installing such infrastructure and then people are vandalizing such infrastructure, it tends to take us backwards, like maybe not even back to where we are starting from. It's taking us back to where we need to go back to the drawing table and start discussing better ways to install our physical infrastructures for the internet. Also, one of the biggest challenge I have, in my experience, I've come to observe is the challenge of power supply. Power supply is a huge challenge for internet accessibility. So there are so many challenges that we need to address in order to have an improved digital infrastructure in Nigeria. Power supply is one. And then when we come to the, okay, then is the mic. Okay, how about now? That means it's from the speaker phone, speaker or mic. When we talk about localizing content is also one of the challenges we have. A lot of Nigerian organizations have not localized our .ng web address, domain name regulation. So how do we even promote the internet when we are not even localizing our content in our own domain? So I believe these are all challenges that we need to talk about. I don't know if I have a time frame or I could still continue talking. All right.
Okay. I hope the folks online can hear us. It's interesting that we're talking about digital infrastructure and the experience. There's a lot. All right. I hope we can take this experience into account. You know, unstable connectivity, right? And if we gathered here to talk about this, experiencing this, you can also imagine what folks around the country, particularly in rural areas, are experiencing. Right. So this is the first-hand account of the challenges of digital infrastructure. You know, and that's why I want to you know, swing to you, Mrs. Balogun. You are experiencing promoting multi-stakeholder engagement to promote the use of national identifier .ng, right? What's your experience when it comes to promoting that, you know, across, you know, the length and breadth of the country, especially, you know, to people who are not necessarily in the tech industry, but who you're trying to get to become familiar with .ng and use it, you know, effectively?
Thank you so much. So I'm sure everybody here knows about the .ng. The speaker in the last session did a very great job in promoting that. The .ng, as we all know, is our identity on the internet. We promote it. What NITDA does is that it's a registry, and then the model that we operate is quite unique. When people hear about us, they think we are government owned. We are not owned by the government. It's a multi-stakeholder led organizations, private partnerships. So we have the registry, which is NITDA, and then we have our registrars, which we regard as our core stakeholders, because they are the ones that go about to register the .ng to the end users, the registrants. So like Mr. Ewah said, of course, we have challenges. We have been promoting the .ng. There's some places we go to, let's not even say rural, there's still some areas here that people say, oh, they've not heard about the .ng. And in some cases where you even know about the brand, you know, there's this reluctance to actually adopt the .ng. And then based on our research and the feedback, we know that most people don't just want to be associated with the Nigerian brand. You know, this goes beyond us. It has to do with imaging. It has to do with the brand of Nigeria as a whole. You know, people will tell you, I don't want to be associated. I don't want people to know I'm Nigerian. I don't want, you know, so that is a major, you know, challenge there, but it's changing. You know, we can obviously do better. The adoption rates can be better. It's changing on our own part as NITDA. We are promoting awareness. You know, that's what we're here. You know, we want everyone to know that you should have a .ng. That is our identity. That's our infrastructure, you know, and we are also encouraging, you know, the adoption. Thank you.
Thank you. This way I'll turn to my brother online. Yeah, I hope you can hear me. Yeah. So you are in the advocacy space, and having heard the challenges that Ms. Balogun talked about, convincing people that the use of .ng is good for their business, is good for the image of the country. You know, how is your experience? Not just around the use of .ng, but other digital infrastructures. You know, as you look at, you know, increasing the sphere and making the internet more available to a broader spectrum of the population.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. I hope you can hear me.
Very well.
I will take this from two perspectives. I will ride on what Mr. Rudman did say, references broadly. He referred to ROW challenges, right-of-way challenges, and what needs to be done to address that. We had done some work earlier on, and we identified, yes, so the operators have not been synergizing, but sometimes if we had a consistent and stable right-of-way regime, policy, regulation across the country, it will compel for these operators to come together and work as one. It will also help government as well. But where you have a rule standard in Lagos different from Benin, different from Oyo, it's to be beyond what this 145 naira per linear meter projection that was suggested to the National Economic Council was that all states set up a one-stop shop where point where you can get, each state rather, where you can get approvals for right of way, etc., etc. And then the states can synergize with each other and have the same kind of standards around approval timelines and processes for approvals, etc., etc. So like this dig once policy, like Alhaji Rudman was referring to, you know, is being implemented in some states and not in others. But if it's implemented or enforced for compliance across the country, then of course the issues that come from disparate digging will be addressed. But let me go into something that is very, very unique and novel. You see, our colleagues earlier on had said that the ISPs are not ubiquitous as they should be. I want to focus on this from the rural area perspective. So you have Smile and Spectranet who are struggling in Lagos and Ibadan, Abuja and Port Harcourt, and MTN and Co who are ubiquitous everywhere. And we understand that digital inclusion is about having access to internet and broadband across the country, everywhere, whether in urban and rural areas. it is obvious that coverage of internet and broadband in underserved rural and semi-rural areas unserved is subpar, and Smile and SpectraNet will not go there. MTN will go there because it's, so what model can be put in place to encourage small-scale enterprises, with unique business model that will provide service in such areas? Yes, can you hear me?
It's been breaking. So I would like to advise you to turn off your video. Perhaps it will improve your the quality of your connection.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've done that. So just quickly,
what
I'm trying to say is that we need to have there's a project that CITAD has been running. I thought our sister there would highlight it for community networks in unserved and underserved areas, which typically would provide services for communities in those areas, access to internet and broadband services. But the challenge there is that they are not going to run the same kind of business model that Smile and Co are running. For example, nobody will want to go and stay in the rural area to be employed by a community network in a rural area. And then the rural area, a service provider in rural area will not adopt the same kind of marketing model that MTN or Smile will adopt. They're not going to adopt. So there's a special model that can be considered to encourage sustainability of internet service providers or last mile connectivity providers in unserved areas. Now, when you look at the Nigeria Communications Act, this is the most important point, sorry. When you look at the Nigeria Communications Act, there's the USPF that is set up there. The USPF has a mandate, it's an obligation under Section 118 of that Act to provide services and subventions to community-based networks, to build networks and to for billing, etc., etc. That is an obligation, but somehow it's been overlooked. So it's something that, if put in place on the community networks built up in unserved areas and sustained there. So that's, for me, is a big issue that needs to be considered. Hopefully we have a new government minister coming in. He can look at this holistically and see how we take it on. Thank you. Can you hear me? I'm through.
I'm going to actually, if you can hear me, I'm going to come back to you. Okay. But the list that we have
even when you're using even when you're using any of the major services, or some of the products from the likes of Smile, SpectraNet, and the rest, once you're out of Lagos, Abuja, and the major cities, they don't work, right? So yes, that's a very useful, an important point he has made. One which those of us involved in developing policy. We need to put our heads together, to try to resolve. Earlier on, I talked about the zero rating policy. That's an example, but we can also see. But above all, and this is going to be my next
usually,
because we've been talking a lot about the high cost of infrastructure or services and how they impact on access, right? At the top of this all is the issue of value to the consumer. Initially, when GSM services were brought to Nigeria, they were very expensive, right? But as we continue to diversify the value chain, the value became increasingly, the cost became increasingly lower, right? How might we see more of this when it comes to internet data? We have a lot of, the digital infrastructures are merely means to, important ends, whether we are talking about access to education or health or agriculture, security, and so on, So do we think that there is still a gap at the value creation end of the conversation, and that will make this the use of digital infrastructure more expedient and drive down the costs? And what should we expect from the innovation community? And I want to go back to Mr. Muhammad, to discuss this, how additional value creation may be achieved, to make internet services, more affordable.
Okay, I don't know whether it's value add or some of the challenges that the telcos have. Can you hear me? Hello? Hello?
Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
But can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yes,
We can hear you online.
I know, of course, online you can hear me, but I'm talking about physical down there.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't know whether it is a value that is there to drive, the cost down or to solve the current challenges we have in Nigeria. You know that, Dr. Ben, right? The cost of diesel last year has increased by over 300%. And almost all the, 50,000 cell sites in Nigeria have been powered by diesel. And therefore, the cost cannot really come down when the cost of running business is going up. In terms of co-location, that is about 40% of the operational cost of every single service provider, right? They have pay salaries, they pay rent, they pay this, but the substantial chunk actually goes to powering those sites. And as long as there is no electricity in Nigeria and you have to carry diesel to a site, cost of transportation of the diesel has gone up because diesel has gone up as well. Because of the high cost of diesel is now an asset. You have to get an escort to deliver the diesel to the cell sites, and therefore increases your cost. And where you want to go and serve the underserved areas, in some states where you said SpectraNet and the rest are not going, in some of those states they have huge taxes, right? They are looking for internally generated revenue, and therefore they have a lot of taxes that they put on the service providers. There are so many incidences where government shut down cell sites because of revenue. And these are multiple taxations. Based on what I have learned, there are around 46 different taxes that the telcos are paying to government. So when you put all this together, it creates a non-business friendly environment for those telcos. And therefore, why should they go to those locations, right? To provide access, cheaper internet access, as you mentioned. So it's important that government identify these bottlenecks and ensure that they simplify the process of licensing, simplify the process of taxation, so that it's easy for operators to go to those states. So for example, in some of those states, if you are to go there, you have to go and talk to Ministry of Environment when you are building your site. You have to talk to Ministry of Health because they would say that you have to fumigate the site. You have multiple ministries, Ministry of Works for you to get the access to the roads to lay your fiber. all sorts of ministries. So government in those states needs to find a way to harmonize and provide a simple desk for the telco operators and for all ISPs that want to operate in their state, so that there is one help desk for them to pay all these taxes instead of them to follow up from different departments, different ministries. And this creates what is it called? A bulky, cumbersome process. And those are roadblocks for service providers to be in those locations. You know, there are so many other things I want to say, but I don't want to talk too much. But you said value add. So for me, I think the value add should be government realizing that internet is critical to almost all aspects of our lives. And therefore, they should find ways to get their citizens the cheapest internet possible. As we speak, internet, technology, ICT contributes 16% of our GDP. That is second to agriculture. After agriculture is internet access. 16%, even though it's 16%, but it has wider economic impact of almost 80%, because almost all commercial transactions, bank transactions, so many things are relying on telecommunications and communication markets and all that, right? So it has huge impact, and therefore state governments especially should focus on finding ways to promote internet access in their states and make their states friendly for investment. Thank you so much, and I hope I'm making sense. Thank you.
Value, of course, cost is a very important determinant. We also know that a lot of the players in this space, you know, especially the telcos, are increasingly seeking ways to, you know, expand the portfolio of services. You know, that's exactly what I was referring to, because there are obviously lots of market gaps. There are non-consumption markets where, as I mentioned, education, health, for instance, key sectors that could use some of the innovation that would depend on internet access, right? So, and these are areas where all of us, all stakeholders, particularly government, you know, would continue should be engaging with the private sector, to create policies that would enable the private sector players to open new markets, right? Also as a way of not just mitigating some of the excruciating costs of running businesses, but also improving their bottom line. I would come to my brother who is sitting beside me here before I go to Mr. Nwokoro. You manage the NITDA's domain service, right? And some of the experience that we've talked about here, they come through your decks in terms of how government entities utilize the internet, to enhance the delivery of services, So, what do you, in your opinion, do you think needs to be? We need to be doing more, to make this resource more useful to government?
Thank you very much, sir. From our day-to-day experience, we have discovered that the agencies, the ministries, departments, and agencies that are supposed to use these infrastructures presently do not even see the need to use them. So most of them are not in this present day reality of the internet and the power of the internet. And so it's important for us to begin to look at areas of building capacity in them, letting them know the huge potential that is with the internet. It might interest you to note that the younger generation, though we call them the digital natives, they are inquisitive. They want to do virtually everything with the internet. I was discussing with my colleague yesterday morning that my little girl of 8 years old woke up in the morning and engaged me on chat AI, or what we call chat GPT. And it was interesting. I enjoyed her driving her from home to school, the kind of conversation that my daughter could engage me in on AI at 8 years of age. Yes, they are natives, but those who are not native, who are digital immigrants, like we will say, our public servants who are 2, 3, 4 years near retirement, we must begin to also engage them. We engage them and let them know that there's a need for them to build their capacity, because we cannot say that digitally everything is okay when they are left behind. If you shut your door and your neighbor who shares the same block of flats with you leaves his own open, then intrusion can come in through your neighbor. So there's a need for us to engage them and also see how we can build capacity. And so what we have been trying to do in NITDA is to go beyond what our mandate specifies, as much as we can assist to ensure that we bring them up to speed. It's important. And of course, the huge cost is another thing. The cost of accessing this service could be huge for many of them. Many of these organizations complain of the cost of bandwidth, cost of this, cost of that. So there's a need for us, like Mr. Rudman said, to also look at the cost. And I don't blame them, because when you look at the statistics available, you would discover that the internet bandwidth that is available for use is grossly utilized. I tried to do my findings and I discovered that out of the 15 submarine cables that land in the coast around West Africa, 5 of them are available in Nigeria. And out of the bandwidth of about 40 terabytes that comes in, it will interest you to know that about 10 of it is only utilized. So Nigeria is at the capacity of about 10%, not to talk of infrastructures that are available in all these service providers. People like Mewan, people like MTN, like Galaxy and other service providers. So there's a need for us to come quickly to speed and provide access so that those who had invested money in those areas also can recoup their investment. Because of course, the man who puts money in wants to get value back for his money. He wants to say, an investor wants to say in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years, I should be able to begin to get back something from my investment. I was impressed when this hub in Oyo, the Oyo hub, came up, and you could see how people are eager to get value for the internet. And the question is, how many of them have .ng domain? Yes, you say I'm back to .ng. Yes. In NITDA, we have devised a way of doing our regulations. So we call it soft regulation. We regulate softly. We don't hit you hard. And what we do basically is we try to put some little hurdles on your path that will make you to obey or keep to the regulations that we have. So there are certain things you cannot get unless you are a .ng carrier. If you send a government a mail, an official email to me, and the email is emanating from a .gov.ng domain, it's as good as writing on your letterhead. I don't need to ask much questions about it, because I know that for you to carry a .gov.ng email address, then you must be a government official. So things like that are areas in which we must look at. We must encourage people to adopt the use of this, because if they have an email address attached to them officially, and they know that a request will come, they have to treat the request, then they will want to have internet. Then they will want to buy data to ensure that they can attend to pressing official issues, even outside the office. So these are some areas in which we are looking at it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Again, one of the recurring points here throughout this conversation has been around the need for more investor-friendly policies, right? And I think that, you know, at the end of this interaction, I mean, that I hope the rapporteurs are taking note of this, and we would like, you know, to have a catalog of some of these experiences that stakeholders are having, particularly when it comes to multiple taxation, you know, so that this can be deliberated, you know, at MAC, and also be able to pass on the recommendations to government. You know, that's I would like to go over to the issue of data, not internet data in this sense, you know, but because digital infrastructure is both solid and soft, and data happens to be, you know, a very important infrastructure, you know, today. In the previous panel, we heard discussions around how you know, effective use of data can be advantageous to the country, but also how data may be used in a way that may not be beneficial, or may not protect the data owner. All right. So my question now, and I would like any one of the panelists to, you know, to indicate interest in addressing this, is that yes, we are expanding the use of the internet, but at the same time we are also generating massive volume of data. Some of this data is already being utilized by, you know, the tech companies, the likes of Meta, you know, Twitter and so on, you know, to their advantage, right? Where do you think that government needs to, you know, focus attention in a way that would reposition data that is generated, you know, from internet infrastructure, you know, to be able to enhance our digital transformation process, you know, increase opportunities for more populations, you know, including youth, women, you know, or even segments of the society, like those in the education on health. This, of course, we recognize the fact that we have the Data Protection Act, but we are also are referring to data monetization here.
Can I try?
Anyone in particular?
Yeah.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
I can. Okay, who's talking? Sorry.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Mohammed, carry on first, Mohammed. I'll come
Oh,
after
okay.
you.
Okay.
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 You want to take the mic to
Dr. Ben,
Yes.
can you
Okay.
hear me?
I can hear you now.
Yes. Okay. Excellent one. As you rightly said, we are generating huge data from Nigeria, considering that Nigeria is the 7th in the world when it comes to internet users, and we are the first in Africa, you know, with according to NCC records, almost 160 million people are online, and around 48 of that are on broadband. But unfortunately, most of it is just eyeball networks, because people are just browsing from Nigeria. And where do they go to? They go to the content networks, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Amazons, the Microsofts, the Twitters, Yahoos, and the rest. And to be honest with you, the value add when it comes to all that is so small, because it's not making huge impact on the ecosystem. We are basically data consumers. So to reverse that trend, there was a policy that was announced by the federal ministry and in collaboration with NITDA towards domestication of our website under .gov.ng. And I think it has to be wider. The government has to be deliberate when it comes to policies in finding ways to attract all these global content players to host their information within Nigeria. That will also be part of the initiatives that will drop the cost of internet, because as we speak now, the internet is outside Nigeria. You have to go and fetch it, and that is why it is expensive. So, and if you domesticate it, it means more data centers will spring up in Nigeria. As we speak now, there are a lot of data centers in Lagos, but when you look at other states, you don't have those data centers. So, and for those data centers to really expand, the content has to be domesticated. So I think government needs to really engage with the various stakeholders, all the various actors, to find out what are the best regulatory interventions that they can provide for domestication of this content. The policies you mentioned regarding data, what do you call it? The new, what do you call it? The ministry for, not ministry, where my brother is the head. Sorry, my head is not really correct today. I didn't sleep well. So when it comes to data protection, you have to have your data locally for you to even protect it, right? So I think it's important government should find ways to ensure that our data is domesticated within our data centers in Nigeria, and that will drop cost. That's just my intervention.
Thank you. Unfortunately, the connection was quite unstable, so we lost a lot of what you said. But I hope the audience heard you well. What I got was that, because of the current architecture of some of the big tech players, the cost of access is higher. They have to, and if we have a policy that compels them to host their content, locally, that would drive down costs, right? Okay.
May I just add something, sir?
Hello? Yes, please.
May I just say something? Yes, so Osondu speaking. Aligned with what Mr. Rudman did say, but one point, and this is a practical.
Before I come back to my panelists, I would like to ask any of the participants in the room here who wants to make a comment. Maybe 2 people from here, and then 2 people online. So
Mr. Osondu, they didn't hear you. Hello.
He cut me off. He cut me off.
He's not hearing you. Hello.
I wasn't hearing you, please. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, okay. I was surprised anyway. So what I'm saying is this.
Okay.
What I'm saying, can you hear me now?
Speaking, please. Who is speaking, please?
My name is Osondu Nwokoro.
Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, sorry. I didn't hear you. I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
Okay. So what Mohammed did say is apt. The big organizations will need to host, will be encouraged to host data in Nigeria for obvious reasons. Business, commercial.
Please hold on, please. Hold on. Changing so that we can hear.
Okay, I think it's from me.
Please hold on. Hold on, sir.
Okay.
Can you, okay, you can go ahead now, sir.
Okay. Can you all hear me, please?
Not yet. Okay, go ahead.
Hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm saying what Mr. Rudman said is most spot on. We have to have an approach that will encourage or get these MTNs and co to have presence here. Not even know that maybe the Googles and co to are determined that they want to host their data in this country, in the data centers around, and even other platforms that can be put in place. And that is one reason. One reason for that is why we had the data protection NDPR, data protection regulations, enacted in 2019. And recently you have the Data Protection Commission in place. It's a good thing, commendable. However, assurances need to be had that the Data Protection Commission has the capacity. I know it's a spin-off from NITDA, has the capacity to manage these details. The NDPR has extensive requirements as to data protection officers, information that should be sent to the Data Protection Commission regularly. And now, but I have a personal experience. My firm applied in January to NDP, Data Protection Bureau then, to be listed as a Data Protection Compliance Officer organization. And we paid the 50,000 naira that is required. We didn't get a receipt. We didn't get any feedback. And we will call people, I'm in Lagos, they at the point, stop responding to me. And that makes us wonder really whether the commission has a structure, has put